Hello my darlings, and thank you for listening. Hello my darlings, and thank you for watching. I thought today I would follow on from my previous discussion about the importance of sheds and my example of Mr. Tiger Woods, the former great golfer. Now I appreciate that I am running a risk by saying these things on YouTube, because ideally this information that I am about to give you is something that should be the exclusive preserve of husbands. But many of you YouTubers are also women, are you not? I would regard this as being secret men's business, so I would ask, if you don't mind, all ladies, please immediately turn off this recording. Of course you're still watching. Okay, so I guess I am hoping that I will save more lives by imparting this information that I have to tell you than I will lose. So husbands, men, please listen up. The importance of sheds in your married life. And make no mistake about it, my friends, this can indeed save your life. Now, if you live in a house, you have a garden, and in the garden you can place a shed. And the shed, as I mentioned in the last talk, is your place of final refuge. If, God forbid, the horror should happen, and you are being pursued by your now berserk wife, who is possibly armed with a weapon, you will flee to your shed, and there you will be safe. And there you can call your friends, who can come and rescue you. Now let us consider the practicalities of this. Firstly, what should your shed be made of? Now, under no circumstances whatsoever is your shed ever to be made from anything that is even remotely flammable. You may be thinking, well, cedar would be nice. It has a nice grain, it's water resistant, you can stain it, would look really buff. No, you do not do this thing ever. Imagine the scenario. You are now fleeing to your shed, you are safely inside, and your now berserk wife is on the outside of the shed. And she cannot get in, and she looks at the shed and she goes, aha! And she runs off and gets the kerosene, and then that is the end of your shed and the end of you. And make no mistake, many, many husbands die like this. It's so common now that even the media don't report it. A young reporter runs in and tells the experienced editor, Mr. Editor, did you hear? A man died a couple of blocks away. And the editor will look at the journalist and go, was he a husband? And the journalist will go, well, yes. And the editor will go, forget it. We'll go with the cat stuck up the tree story for page 3 instead. No one gives a shit anymore. So please, your shed should not be made of anything remotely flammable. Brick and or concrete is good. And you must give special thought to the door. The door must be strong, of course, but you must also think this through. When you think of a conventional shed, you have a roof, 4 walls and a door, and the door has a lock on the outside. Well, you're thinking, well, Baron, so what? Think it through. Think of what the shed is really for. Imagine that you are fleeing to your shed, closely pursued by your wife. You open the door, you go into the shed, you close the door, and then you realize to your horror that you have no means at all of securing the door from the inside. Why? Because there's no lock on the inside. So you will have to make certain that you put a lock on the inside of your shed. Now the roof of the shed is not that important, because even a totally berserk wife cannot jump up onto the roof of a shed. So the roof is just something simple to keep the rain off, but the walls and the door are critical. Now you may be one of those poor husbands who says, but Baron, I do not live in a house. I live in an apartment. And my darlings, for you, it is not so good. The shed is not a possibility, of course, so really you only have one choice, and that choice is to go to the pub. Now that will work most times, but pubs, even in Australia, are not open 24 hours a day. So if the horror happens, you just have to flee out the front door, or if you don't live too high up, just jump off the balcony. You have to do what you have to do, huh? And I ask you to consider this. Have you ever thought, think of the inner city, of whichever city you may happen to live in, and think of the number of pubs and clubs that there are in the inner city. There are so many of them. On almost every second street corner there is a club or a pub. And then you think of the leafy outer suburbs. There are far fewer pubs. Have you ever stopped to think why? Hopefully now you will realize. So when somebody comes up to you and says one day, I wonder why there are so many pubs in the inner city compared to the suburbs, you'll be able to look them in the face and say, well, it is obvious. It is because the husbands do not have sheds. Now, you may have a shed, and you may have a lock on the inside, and you have 4 extremely strong walls, and 1 strong door, an roof, and you might think you are ready. No, you are not, because you haven't thought it through. And so many husbands die at this stage. They have a shed, and they think it is done. No. You must imagine yourself in every room in your house. And you must imagine that your berserk wife, possibly armed with a weapon, is following you into that room. And you must think to yourself, how am I going to get from wherever I am in the house to the shed? You see, that is the critical bit that so many husbands just don't think about. So you must essentially conduct a series of fire drills. So when your wife is away, maybe shopping or with the girlfriends, you will do a fire drill in every room in your house, and you will think to yourself something like this: I am now in living room area 2, and my wife is blocking exit A. I can still go through exit B, or worst case scenario, I can jump through the window. And you must do this in every single room in your house. And not just inside your house either, but also outside. If you do alterations, renovations, you must factor this into the equation. And you must practice this to see how many seconds it will take you to get to your shed. And for heaven's sake, do not leave garden tools lying around. Can you imagine? It is 3 o'clock in the morning, it is dark, there is no moon, it might be raining, you're barefooted, and all of a sudden you have to flee to your shed. So you perhaps jump through the window, and then you know if you run right and take a hard left, you can be in your shed in 6 seconds. But you run, and then you step on a rake. Boom! That will be the end of you. These few seconds that you have when you first run to your shed before your wife understands what you're doing and where you're going are absolutely critical in your chances of survival. So it is very important that you do these things and think them through. And you must practice, 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 like a pianist, until eventually it all becomes muscle memory. Because believe me, my friends, if and when the horror happens, you will not be able to think of anything. You will be in such a state of panic, you will be acting instinctively, and all your choices must be correct. If you suddenly stumble and you can't remember which way you're meant to go, you will wind up, imagine, in a dead end, and then you will be lost. And I do not want to get phone calls and telegrams like this anymore. It is appalling. I might get a phone call and somebody says, have you heard that such and such is dead? And I will go, dead? I didn't even know he was sick. What happened? And he says, well, it was all very sudden. Got hit on the back of the head with a meat tenderizer, and that was it. I do not want to get phone calls and telegrams like this anymore. So please, please, gentlemen, build yourself a shed.